Oversight refers to the actions taken to review and monitor public sector organizations and their policies, plans, programs, and projects to ensure that they are achieving expected results, represent good value for money, and are in compliance with applicable policies, laws, regulations, and ethical standards. Oversight is a critical governance function performed by boards of directors, committees, councils, and external bodies. Legislative oversight powers are provided for in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as well as in the rules of the two chambers of the National Assembly. It is provided for in the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in sections 88, 89, 128, and 129. It is the responsibility of overseeing the executive arm in implementation of projects over which the National Assembly has approved funds. Oversight requires that the National Assembly conduct investigations into governance issues through its committees and that they monitor the performance of MDAs, that is, ministries, departments, and agencies for the benefits of the citizens. After making a law, the legislature's main role is to see whether the law is effectively implemented and whether the law captures the intent of the drafters. The Tertiary Education Trust Fund is an agency of the federal government created by law to provide supplementary support to all levels of public tertiary institutions, with the main objective of using funding alongside project management for the rehabilitation, restoration, and consolidation of tertiary education in Nigeria. As such, it is subject to oversight by the National Assembly. A previous edition of The Paradigm Shift provided details of the oversight visit of the House of Representatives. On the heels of that, the Nigerian Senate came calling to perform its own duties. What happened during this visit? How did the proceedings go? All these and more coming up on this edition of The Paradigm Shift. These are the chronicles of the journey to institutionalize research and development in Nigeria. Hello, and welcome to this edition of TETFund, The Paradigm Shift. I am Stanley Bentu. With the return of democratic rule in 1999, Nigeria has had 6 consecutive legislatures spanning a period of 24 years. The country operates a bicameral legislature made up of 2 independent chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate, referred to as the Red Chamber, comprises of 109 senators representing 3 senatorial districts of each of the 36 states of the Federation. Membership of this chamber is based on equal representation. Now, it's led by the Senate President and his deputy, as well as 8 principal officers, namely the Senate Leader and his deputy, the Minority Leader and his deputy, the Chief Whip and his deputy, as well as the Minority Whip and his deputy. While the House of Representatives, also known as the Green Chamber, is made up of 360 federal representatives, each member represents 1 federal constituency in Nigeria. The number of constituencies per state varies, since the population strength is the criteria that was used to determine the number of each state's federal constituencies. The Green Chamber is led by the Speaker, who is assisted by the Deputy Speaker, along with 8 principal officers, similar to that of the Senate. The National Assembly is constitutionally vested with several functions, but prominent among which are lawmaking, representation, and oversight. And there are also a host of others. Our focus today, as it affects TETFund, is on the oversight of the National Assembly. In a previous edition of the program, members of the House of Representatives Committee on Tertiary Education performed such function at TETFund. Let's have a quick look at the visit, as well as to try to understand the standards upon which oversights are based on, which in this case happens to be the mandate and objectives of TETFund.
The main source of income available to the fund is the 2% education tax paid from the assessable profits of companies registered in Nigeria. The Federal Inland Revenue Service, FRS, collects the tax on behalf of the fund. The funds are disbursed for the general improvement of education in federal and state tertiary institutions, specifically for the provision or maintenance of essential physical infrastructure for teaching and learning, instructional material and equipment, research and publications, academic staff training and development, and any other need which, in the opinion of the Board of Trustees, is critical and essential for the improvement and maintenance of standards in the higher educational institutions. The Board of Trustees of TETFund has the following responsibilities as stated by the Tertiary Education Trust Fund Act of 2011. Monitoring and ensure collection of tax by the Federal Inland Revenue Service and ensure transfer to the fund. Manage and disburse the tax. Liaise with appropriate ministries and bodies responsible for collection or safekeeping of the tax. Receive requests and approve projects after due consideration. Ensure disbursement to various public tertiary education institutions in Nigeria. Monitor and evaluate the execution of projects. Invest funds in appropriate and safe securities. Update the federal government on its activities and progress through annual audited reports among the states of the Federation in case of regular intervention. Review progress and suggest improvements within the provisions of the Act. Do such other things that are necessary or incidental to the objective of the fund under these acts or as may be assigned by the federal government. Make any issue guidelines from time to time to all beneficiaries on disbursement of monies from the fund, on the use of monies received from the fund, generally to regulate the administration, application, and disbursement of monies from the fund under this Act. The Board of Trustees administers, manages, and disburses the tax imposed by the TETFund Act on the basis of funding of all public tertiary educational institutions, equality among the 6 geopolitical zones of the federal government in case of special intervention, equality among the states of the Federation in case of regular intervention. The distribution shall be on the ratio of 2:1:1 as between universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. The BOT also has the power to give consideration to the peculiarities of each geopolitical zones in the disbursement and management of the tax imposed by this Act between the various levels of tertiary institutions. With great power, they say, comes great responsibility. Members of the House of Representatives Committee on Tertiary Education and Services, led by the Chairman, Honorable Aminu Suleiman, paid an oversight visit to TETFund. Architect Echono, while speaking on the operations of the fund and the state of finances, especially from 2017 to date, said 2021 collection was what the fund used to operate in 2022, a figure that has dropped to 189 billion naira from a peak of 257 billion naira in the previous years.
Today, we will be apprising them on the operations of TETFund and our state of finances, especially the trajectory of the chairman from 2017 up to 2020. We saw or witnessed a steady rise in collections under the education tax. But unfortunately, last year, for the 2021, there was a sharp drop. And that has left us in a very dire position. And we, for example, as I said, from 154 billion in 2017, it rose steadily to 257 billion, the tax collections over the years. So by 2020, we got to 57 billion. But unfortunately, last year's collection, which is what we used to operate this year, dropped sharply to 189 billion. So over 60 billion drop in revenue or in resources available to TETFund. And the way we operate, 2021 collections are used for 2022 operations.
Responding to the Executive Secretary, Honorable Aminu Suleiman assured the fund of its continued support and cooperation to ensure a strengthening of the system and its commitment to oversight requirements, even as he urged TETFund to mandate state institutions benefiting from its intervention to submit reports of their operations within 3 weeks.
We congratulate you and we assure you of our support without prejudice to the fact that sometimes we can agree to disagree. And I'm sure you are familiar with said we have had calls several, even when you are the permanent secretary, to disagree entirely with the ministry, but are not predicated on any personal motive, but to share with you where matters we felt differently from the way things are being done. And in most cases, we usually arrive at the same page. I have no doubt that that relationship will continue here. The essence is for us, like I said, to better the system. But if you take federal government subvention, then you must be able to account for this. I use this opportunity to advise that all those responsible for this should ensure that within 3 weeks, all the states and institutions complied. If we did not, the committee will decide whether they are entitled to continue to benefit from a subvention that is under the control of TETFund.
Through it all, TETFund remains fixated on its core objectives and applies its intervention in a manner that brings the academia, government, and industry together. Nigeria is at a time in its history where its academia is much needed because the nature of today's economy is predicated on information, knowledge, and technology. Information is always multiplying, knowledge is always expanding and changing, technology is always advancing. With these three foundations constantly shifting like tectonic plates, tertiary education in Nigeria cannot afford to stand still, lest it is left behind. It must keep evolving and progressing to keep up with the national need.
Well, most activities of the National Assembly are done through committees. The committees are populated by distinguished senators and honorable members of both chambers based on professionalism and vast experiences in life. These experiences prepare them to be able to scrutinize bills, motions, and to carry out oversight functions. The legislators also intervene in the conduct of public institutions and officials. Accordingly, the apex parliament operates the committee system. Both chambers of the nation's highest lawmaking body appoint members into its special and standing committees. The Committee on Tertiary Education and Services have the role of carefully scrutinizing essentially how faithfully government agencies and institutions like TETFund are sticking to their core mandates. In late August, it was the turn of the Nigerian Senate to do its duty. Let's find out how that went.
Since inception, the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, TETFund, has made a huge positive impact on Nigeria's public universities, polytechnics and colleges of education. Its application of the education tax has brought about a revolution at every public higher learning institution in the areas of infrastructure, staff training, book publication, library development and research and development. Yet, the journey has not been without its challenges, as the evolving demands of the tertiary education subsector continues to grow. The government must respond accordingly. Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions and Tertiary Education Trust Fund, TETFund, has advocated for an increase in education tax from 2.5% to 3% of the assessable profits of all registered businesses in Nigeria to improve research and development in the country. The committee made the submission during an oversight visit to TETFund to ascertain the level of 2021 and 2022 performance of the budget. The delegation, led by the chairman of the committee, Senator Ahmed Baba Keita, expressed hope that the executive secretary of TETFund would replicate the same vision and mission of transforming the education sector he had while he was serving as the permanent secretary of the ministry in TETFund. Also, while expressing his satisfaction over the reforms and excellent performance of TETFund for the year under review, speaking through his deputy, Senator Sandy Ono, the committee chairman maintained that education and health sectors are two critical sectors that drive development, hence the need for an upward review of the tax. To this end, the delegation hoped that in the next assembly, the tax will be increased to 3%.
As we know, it's an intervention agency set up to provide supplementary support to all levels of public tertiary institutions with the main objective of using funding alongside project management for the rehabilitation, restoration, and consolidation of tertiary education in Nigeria. The fund's 2% education tax paid from the assessable profit of companies registered in Nigeria has obviously had a massive and sustained impact on improving tertiary education in Nigeria through several interventions.
Earlier in his presentation, the TETFund Executive Secretary, Architect Sonny Echono, disclosed that the harmony between members of the National Assembly and the education sectors was largely responsible for most of the achievements in the education sector. He expressed gratitude to the National Assembly for passing the Finance Act last year, which resulted in an increase in the education tax to 2.5%, adding that it was done in consultation and shared acceptance of the need to increase investment in education.
We are grateful for this magnanimity by the National Assembly, and we dare say that it was done based on the consultations and the shared acceptance of the need to increase funding and investment in education. There was no strike prior to it, and it was not based on any forced demand.
He pointed out that 257 billion was generated from the 2020 tax budget, which was utilized for 2021 interventions. However, it dropped to 189.5 billion in 2021, which is what is being utilized in 2022. He also noted that the fund has largely been operating in deficit in recent times.
I also quickly inform you that we have been largely operating on deficits. And what I mean by that is that an incident that occurred in 2013, the total tax that was collected in 2013, amounting to 273 billion, was borrowed by the federal government after allocations had already been made to the institutions, because the monies were in our accounts. And that was what was principally used for funding the needs assessment that was given to ASU that you keep hearing about all the time. And it meant that despite the allocation made by TETFund, we didn't have the cash backing. And we have had to, because the programs have been implemented, in fact most of them have been completed now. So technically speaking, the only reason why we are afloat is because we're not paying all our monies releases at the same time. That deficit has been there, but Mr. President graciously approved the refund, and it is being done piecemeal by the Ministry of Finance. I believe we received 2 tranches of about 12 point something, or is it madam? Yeah, 12.8 each time. We received 2. Last year we received 12.8, and this year we've also received 12.8. But if at that rate, you can imagine how long, how many lifetimes before they amortize it. So we are praying that through whatever instruments that are available, that it will be good to do an effective refund en bloc in the same manner that it was taken from our accounts.
The Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions commended the leadership of TETFund on its impressive budget performance for a 2-year period between 2021 and 2022. The fund was rated high in terms of judicious utilization of taxpayers' money towards the provision of major infrastructure and other interventions in the country's tertiary institutions.
We are not inferior anyway. The only thing is that research is at the fulcrum of any development in any part of the country, in the world. Research. So if research is properly funded and there is commitment by the academia, no result will come. So I take you on that. I want you to go further than just what we've done here. Now that the resources are now tripling in. So we hope that next assembly that will come, the 10th assembly, will even move it to 3, so that we'll have enough funds to support research in universities. If we do that, things work well with us.
Well, it's heartwarming to see that the National Assembly and TETFund are on the same page when it comes to seeing the need for greater investment in education. Nigeria cannot take its rightful place as a self-sufficient nation without proper and adequate funds directed towards tertiary education, especially in the areas of research and development. Now, it's hoped that with an act of the National Assembly, TETFund will be able to harvest more funding to make this dream come true. And that is the paradigm shift. Join us again on the next edition of the program. Until then, thank you for stopping by. Good night.